It should be up for you. Do you see it? Okay, great. That sounds fine. So I'm going to actually talk to you about the power of words. And let me do one other thing before I do this. You know, every time I use something, everything is completely different. I'm just going to stop my video for a few because I just start saying too much stuff all over everywhere. When you're actually talking to children about race relation, injustices, you can't just simply hand them a book to read. With children, conversation is a must. So what I'm going to do today is just share a few of my favorite books and resources with you today, because I know as educators, you love resources, because why redo everything if there's some resources that can help you with things? So I'm going to apply some resources, and the list, of course, is endless. So what I'm going to share with you today is only a small sample of what's available. But there have been a lot of books that have come out recently that I didn't include in this. You know, we're right at 2021 has just come in. There are going to be a lot more books published this year. But I'll show you something I have that is sort of like an evolving list that you'll be able to you'll be able to use. I do want to tell you that I am going to send Emily a copy of this presentation. So if you want to just maybe jot some notes, but if you want to just sit back and relax and enjoy, please know that you're going to get a copy of this, and feel free to share it with other educators. We've scheduled time at the end of the presentation for questions, but please feel free to type your questions in the chat box throughout the presentation. And if there's some titles that come to mind with you, feel free to recommend those titles in the text box as well. And I've asked Emily to actually interrupt if she sees a question in the chat box that is relevant at that moment. We'll address it there, and we'll see things from there. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started. Look at this facial expression. Is this how many of us feel when the topic of race relations arises? I will admit it's not an easy subject to discuss. It's difficult when having conversations with individuals within your own race, but it's even more difficult when there are different races seated at the table. When you're talking about with kids, why is it difficult to discuss race relations with children? Here are some of the things that I've heard people say, and some of the things that I've actually read. Some people say they're too young to understand race. I don't want to put racist thoughts into their heads. I don't want them to think white people are bad. I don't want them to feel police officers are bad. And of course, the last one, oh my, what if I say something wrong? We're all afraid of doing that. But with this said, babies as young as 6 months old notice the difference in skin color, eye shape, and hair texture. 6 months old. So since they discover race at a young age as children, why not have conversations with them at young ages? Is racism learned? Well, in my unscientific opinion, the answer is a solid yes. I do think it is a learned behavior. It can be due to a child's environment at home or the community they live in. It can be due to a negative experience or trauma they may have experienced. And it can be due to a lack of contact with people of other races. I tell people a lot of times when I started college, my freshman year, I did have a white roommate, and he was terrified. He wouldn't say a word. He was just trying to be very shy. We had no comment. If I asked him a question, he would answer, but there was no conversation, no elaboration of anything. But as we got to know each other, one of the things that he told me was at his particular school, he said there were only 4 Black girls at his entire school. And he said, I wasn't in any classes with them. I didn't know them. They didn't know me. And he said, and the only other Black person he knew was the lady who used to be his nanny when he was younger. And he said that was it. But so sometimes it can be a mixture of things. But I do not believe that people are born racist. Look at the pictures you see here on the slide, and you just think about when you see children playing on a playground. I think when children are playing on a playground, they don't see color. As long as you don't bite and you're willing to share your toys, I think a lot of times children feel that we can be friends. And I feel like people, we should be able to do the same thing. Some people say, I've heard some parents, because I do this with teachers, I do it with parents, childcare workers, and I've heard one parent just said, well, I never say anything racist, so how can my child learn to be racist? We have to realize that we all have biases. I won't say it's to the extent that we're racist, but we all have biases. I have mine, I know what they are, I deal with them. But children are more intuitive than we actually give them credit for. Nonverbal clues like facial expressions, tone of voice, body language, all of these things will leave an impression on children. And all of you know that children are like little sponges. They will absorb things, see things, repeat things that you don't have any idea that they're listening, or you think you're whispering sometimes, or that they're doing something else. But they're some smart individuals. They are smarter than we give them credit for a lot of time, but they pick up things that particular way. I got this from NPR because even though I'm at an academic environment, I believe you can find great things from lots of different places. And I found this on NPR when they were talking about talking race with young children. Just some things to think about. Don't shush or shut them down if they mention race. And don't always wait for the kids to bring it up. Be proactive, helping them build a positive awareness of diversity. And when a child experiences prejudice, grown-ups need to both address the feelings and fight the prejudices. And yes, children will experience prejudice, and they feel it at a very young age. Sometimes they don't know a word to put on it, but we as adults, we know that's exactly how they're feeling. And you don't have to avoid topics like slavery. Instead, you can give facts and focus on resistance and allies. But we can't try to sanitize history, but we don't want to make everything just sound so bad. But you can focus on the resistance and the allies. And later in my presentation, what I'm going to give you, there's a link to this, and there are other things that NPR has with this, and they do go into detail with each one of those. On Today, they had something one day about how to talk to kids about race and racism, and they have something on their website. Actually talk about it. When necessary, talk about it. Set the example. Navigate their curiosity because you know how curious they are. One thing is to make it relatable, because sometimes if it's relatable, that is just your opportunity for a teachable moment. I was on vacation, this was several years ago, I was on vacation, and the hotel that I was staying in, I guess it was like a huge one, because I think my room was like on the 26th or the 30th floor or something. So we had a nice little ride in the elevator. But there was a white family next to me. It was a mother, father, a young boy, and a young girl. Well, I saw the young boy looking at me, as children will do, and I saw him look at my hand, because my hand was on my suitcase. I saw him look at my hand. I saw him look at his hand, and I saw him doing that back and forth, and he was changing his hand back and forth. And he said to his mom or dad, he said, he's a lot darker than I am. And the parents automatically started shushing him. But I said, no, I'm going to use this as a relatable moment. And I put my hand out and I said, you know what? I am darker than you. I said, why do you think that is? He said, because we're of different races. I said, you're right. I said, you're right. And I said, is there anything wrong with the color of my skin? And he said, no. And I said, guess what? I don't see anything wrong with your skin either. And I don't know how long we all stayed in that hotel, but whenever he saw me, he would always wave and I would hear him tell his family, there's my friend. There's my friend over there. So I just thought that was just a nice, relatable moment. Instead of trying to shish, that was the time to do it. Mistakes will be made. Address those mistakes, and always that you can always be an advocate. For today's presentation, I am going to look at race relations in children's books under these six categories. There are more categories. You could break them up other ways, but I'm going to look at protests, police brutality, segregation, racism, past and present. I just tell people I look forward to the day that we can just say that racism was past, that we don't even have to talk about things in the present. I'm going to talk about biographies because I love the way that biographies can teach about race and race relations. And I'm going to talk about understanding differences. When I'm talking about protests, there are three different types that I like to address: the sit-ins, the marches, and the boycotts. And you'll see I have 3 books here to illustrate each one. Sit-in, how 4 friends stood up by sitting down. That particular story is the story of the Woolworth's lunch counter sit-in, and that actually occurred in North Carolina in Greensboro in 1960. And this protest was seen by very many as the defining moment of the civil rights movement. And as I said, it happened in Greensboro. And I don't know if you've been to the museum in downtown Greensboro. They actually have that counter in that museum. And that is, it's kind of chilling to actually see that, to know what happened with that. When you're talking about marches, one of the best examples I can think of is the series of books that's called March, and it's by the late Congressman John Lewis, and it has 3 different parts. And this book is actually in a graphic novel format. Kids love it, but the information is just priceless. The series, as I said, is a firsthand account of John Lewis's lifelong struggle for civil and human rights. Book 1 actually begins with him as a child in rural Alabama, and it actually ends with the historic march from Selma to Montgomery, which he's really known for. This is a great opportunity to define marches and protests, because sometimes people tend to get some of things all mixed up. Because I like to tell people that marching and protesting, they're our rights as Americans. But when you start looting and destroying property, you've moved it on to a crime then. So it's gone from just a protest or a march. When the looting and stealing and property damage starts, it becomes a crime.
Alan, quick question for you.
Yes.
Someone has asked what ages these books are geared to. Can you share that as you're sharing these books as we go along?
I will tell you, a lot of them I've dealt with elementary, then some are middle and high. But I will tell you, some of these books actually cross the lines. But I will tell you, one of the handouts that I'm going to give you access to, with that handout, I've given you the author title, or just your bibliographic information. I've also done an annotation, and I've always also put grade level on them. So that should be helpful when that comes. But one thing that I have really learned, older children like picture books as well. And some of the material, and I'm going to point out several of them, even though they're picture books and they are appropriate for younger children, they are doing more picture books now that are geared towards middle school and even high school students. And I'll point out some of those. But I do know some of the middle school students do enjoy some of these books, because I have used Rosa with some older kids, and they thoroughly enjoyed it. They did. So thank you for that question. Yep, and I think I did say about Rosa, but with Rosa, this is you know, her ability to sit down and her bravery to do so, that started one of the biggest boycotts that kind of put a lot into the civil rights movement, and it kind of took the civil rights movement through, because she was courageous and very defiant. When we talk about police brutality, and I can tell you from this, something happened in our town, that's going to be elementary. Ghost Boys is middle, and All American Boys will be from middle to high school. So I will tell you that from the get-go. From Something Happened in Our Town, this book follows two families, one white and one black, as they discuss a police shooting of a black man within their community. The book actually shows how questions and discussions held in white households may differ from those in a black household, but how both families, both races are having meaningful discussions. It's just from the point of view that they may be taking the situation. One of the things I like about this book, and some other books that I'm introducing to you have the same, this book includes an extensive notes to parents and caregivers section in the back. And with that, it's very helpful because general guidance about addressing racism with children is outlined. It has a child-friendly glossary of terms, because sometimes from our aspect, it's kind of hard for us to maybe think of how do you really explain this to a third grader. But this glossary, really, they've taken some great time into you taking some terms, and they've broken it down into words that children will understand. They have conversation guides, because you know conversation and dialogue is very big to me when we're talking about something like this. And it also has a link to online resources. And once again, you'll hear me say that word resources a lot, because I truly believe in resources. Ghost Boys. Sometimes when I get new books in, I'll just pick up one and take it home for the weekend to read. So, and I don't even know what the book is about, and I'll just take it home. This is what I did with Ghost Boys, because I was not familiar with Jewel Parker Rhodes, but I just saw the cover and I thought, why not? But I'm glad I did, because in this book, 12-year-old Jerome is killed by a white policeman while he's playing with a toy gun on a playground. And if you can remember in the news, that situation actually happened a few years ago. Well, Jerome's ghost is joined by the ghost of Emmett Till. And Emmett Till helps Jerome process what has happened. And Sarah is the daughter of the police officer who killed Jerome. She's his same age. She can see him, and Jerome befriends her. And between the two of them, they process and learn how to get through this situation. And things were learned on both sides with their families, helping Jerome's family deal with their loss, and also with Sarah and her family, because the police officer had to deal with a lot of things, and it affected his family as well. So this is a good book for showing different sides. And a lot of these books that I talk about, you will see that they're giving things from two points of views, because I think that's one of the best ways to get kids thinking. Because if you only hear things from one point of view, then that might be what they focus on. But when you hear things from opposite point of views, it gives more of an understanding because, you know, the old saying that, you know, there's always three sides to everything. There's your side, their side, and then there's the truth. So having different point of views, this helps kids with discussion. In All American Boys, which was written by Jason Reynolds, if you don't know Jason Reynolds or if you haven't read some of his books, you need to pick up one. He is just a phenomenal writer, and kids get him. He understands the way children think, and they love his work. And if you have some reluctant readers who are boys, especially Black boys, they are really going to love Jason Reynolds' books. And I'll go ahead and throw in Kwame Alexander as well. It's just something about their styles. And one of the things I like about Kwame, because Kwame actually, his writing is poetry. And they don't even know they're learning poetry half of the time, but they love his books. So I'm so glad that we have those two talented authors out here to keep producing such wonderful books. But getting back to the plot of All American Boys, when 16-year-old Rashad is mistakenly accused of stealing, one of his classmates, who happens to be white, his name is Quinn, he witnesses the brutal beating that Rashad received from the police officer. But with this, the plot thickens. The police officer happens to be Quinn's older brother's best friend. So with this story, it is told through Rashad's point of view and Quinn's point of view, and they are doing alternating viewpoints on certain things. Segregation, the ones I have here, the first one and the third one is definitely elementary. The middle one can go to elementary up to middle school. The other side is by Jacqueline Woodson. You're going to hear me say I love so many people, but I actually do. And because I do think the world of Jacqueline Woodson and E.B. Lewis. So just off the bat, this is one of my favorites, but it's a great story. With the other side, it talks about how physical barriers like highways, railroad tracks, rivers, streets, etc., they've historically separated communities. You'll hear about from the wrong side of the tracks. And I hear my parents talk about that even in their town, they knew that you could go as far as this particular street, but when you got to that street, you knew that that was the barrier. There was no sign there, but everybody knew that if you were Black, you didn't go over past this street because that was the white neighborhoods, and vice versa. If you were white, you knew where to stop because you didn't go into the Black neighborhoods. Well, in the other side, two girls, one Black and one white, they gradually get to know each other as they sit on the fence that actually divides their town. And you'll see how much they learn about each other and what it really means about segregation. Seeds of Freedom, the peaceful integration of Huntsville, Alabama. Integrating schools in the 50s and the 60s was not an easy thing to do, especially in the South. I'm from Washington, North Carolina, a little town. Schools did not integrate there fully until 1968. I mean, so that's how long it really took. And there were some Southern towns that it even took a little bit longer. Well, this book describes how the people in Huntsville faced racial discrimination, bullying, and unfairness heads on. They didn't, as somebody said, they didn't talk around it. They didn't try to sugarcoat it. They didn't allow certain things to pass. They faced those things head on, and they did successfully work together to integrate the city school system. When we're talking about integration, you don't hear many stories like this, but the Black community and the white community, they band together to decided we're going to do what it takes to make this a peaceful integration. And they did that. When we're talking about, talking about race, segregation, and things to little children, young children, it is just so funny how some of them may respond. With conversations, yes, there will be lots of questions, and it does take an adult to answer those questions or help them understand, because some of them can't even understand some of these concepts. One of my colleagues who lives in Brooklyn, she is a white female, and she's a white Jewish female, and she has this son who is going to be an amazing man. I don't know what he's going to be, what he's going to do, but he is simply amazing at the age of like 5 and 6. You can just see it. When she read this book to him, she thought he was going to have a lot of conversation because he's a very inquisitive fella. But they read the book, they talked about it a little bit, and he just said, so they didn't want black kids and white kids to go to school together? And his mom was like, yeah, that's how things was. And his response was, that's just mean and dumb. And he was done with it because he was resolute that was just like that was the stupidest thing he's ever heard of in his life, that was what segregation was all about, that people just thought because your skin was different color, you didn't supposed to be together. And she said it was just amazing because to him, it was just like, okay, yeah, that was silly. And he just went on with his day with things. A Taste of Colored Water, it has it's humorous, but of course it's very serious in its context. Right here you see two cousins. This is Lulu and her cousin Jelly. They hang out together. They're like the best of friends, and they live in this rural area. And they're very excited and want to see colored water because they've heard about it from some of their neighbors that in the city, there's colored water. Well, when they finally get to go to the city to see this colored water, and the cover of the book shows you how in their minds they had envisioned colored water to be, because they wanted to know, well, what does the yellow water taste like? What does the blue water taste like? What does the red water taste like? But when they do go into the city, there is a protest and a march going on, and they actually learned what colored water and a colored fountain meant. And they were very surprised to learn that's what it was all about. When we talk about racism, past and present, The Undefeated, it was written by Kwame Alexander. You just heard me talk about him a few minutes ago, and it was illustrated by Kadir Nelson. When I heard this book was in the making, I got so excited because Kadir, once again, he's one of my favorite illustrators. And with Kadir, he's kind of moved away from doing children's books, because if you look and know his style, just look at the New Yorker. He's doing a lot of covers for the New Yorker now. But and another thing about Kadir got to the point he didn't like illustrating other people's books once he became an author. So for Kadir to come out of hiding, I guess, or retirement from children's books to do this and to do it with Kwame Alexander, I was extremely thrilled when I finally saw this book. And you can see from the stickers on the front, it won quite a few awards last year. But this book actually highlights African-American events and historical figures, and it goes back to the transatlantic slave trade, Black soldiers during the Civil War, and it goes straight up to people like Serena Williams and the Black Lives Matter movement. And the portrait of Kwame and the illustrations of Kadir Nelson, I mean, it's a powerful and unforgettable book. one of our faculty members came by and we had it on display, and she actually called me at home to tell me, I just picked up this amazing book, and she didn't know I had seen her pick it up. I said, I bet it's The Undefeated. And she thought I was psychic, but I saw her pick it up. But I know that she would love those kinds of books. So it is a wonderful and powerful book. Ruth and the Green Book. When Ruth and her parents drive to Chicago they drive from Chicago to Alabama to visit her grandmother, they rely on a pamphlet that's called the Negro Motorist Green Book, because this green book helps them find places they can eat and sleep. When I was a young kid, I did not realize at that time why every time we went on a trip, whether it was just a short trip, because I had an aunt who lived in Norfolk, Virginia, and we went there a lot. No matter where we went, we always packed a picnic and had drinks and everything else in the car. I later learned as I grew up, that was just something that my parents carried over from the 30s, 40s, and 50s, when if you were traveling, if you were a person of color, you just couldn't stop at any hotel and just spend the night. You couldn't just go in any restaurant when you got hungry. They actually, a lot of times, just pulled on the side of the road somewhere and just had a picnic. Luckily, you would find a service station to get gas, and a lot of the service stations had bathrooms, but even many of the service stations would not allow Black people to use the bathroom. But this green book was actually put out to help Black people know that in this particular town, if you do need to stay overnight, this is a particular person that she has a rooming house that she rents out rooms. Or if you need something to eat, if you go to a particular restaurant, it's Black owned, and that's where you can go and get a good meal. This book includes facts about the Green Book, and the Green Book was an actual book, and it was written and published by Victor Hugo Green, and he was a New York City mailman, and he actually published the Green Book from 1936 right up to 1966. The last book, We Rise, We Resist, We Raise Our Voices. This is a celebration, well, this is a collection of art, essays, letters, poems, and stories, and they celebrate standing up against prejudice and racism. The Fort was written by Ashley Bryan, so that ought to tell you what you're getting into if Ashley Bryan actually did the foreword. And it includes works and illustrations by people like Jason Reynolds, Kwame Alexander, Equa Holmes, Kelly Starlin Lyon, which is one of our North Carolina very own, Jacqueline Woodson, Javica Steptoe, Rita William Garcia. That's just to name a few. The list goes on and on. But this is something that they are really talking about modern day things that they may have experienced or talked about a particular incident, and some of them are reminiscent about things that may have happened in the past. But the illustrations and the words, perfect marriage with this particular book. I have always loved biographies. As a child, that's what I read. At first I went through a lot of just nonfiction in general, but then when I discovered biographies, I found my love, because I just wanted to read about just people. I probably know more about Abraham Lincoln. I was intrigued by Benjamin Franklin. And to this day, with English royalty, the Tudors, I just can go back from the beginning with that, because that's just one of those things I love, because I love learning about people. But the three that I've chosen here, Voices of Freedom, that's one that I told you that is really meant for middle to high school. This is a picture book, but it is not a book for young children. Elementary school children the content is just a little too strong for them. Because this amazing book presents collage illustrations, poems, and spirituals inspired by the life and work of Fannie Lou Hamer. Fannie Lou Hamer was a voting and women's rights activist. She was a community organizer, and she was a leader within the civil rights movement. A lot of people know of her, a lot of people don't, and if they don't, they should. And this book is a great introduction for adults. So you don't have to raise your hands, but if you have no idea who she is, this is a great book to introduce you to Fannie Lou Hamer. She's probably most known for the saying, "I am sick and tired of being sick and tired." That was one of the things that she talked about a lot. And she lived an extraordinary life. She was the 20th child of sharecroppers, and I did say 20th child, the 20th child of sharecroppers east of the Mississippi Delta. And she went from that to being a representative at the 1964 Democratic National Convention. She gave a powerful speech that will never be forgotten. She was, a polite way of saying it, she was kind of rough around the edges. She didn't take time to choose her words. She was a straight shooter. If it came to her head and if it was an experience that she had experienced, she didn't try to water down anything. She gave it to you as it is. Equa Holmes, who was the illustrator of this book, you'll see lots of yellow throughout this book, because it wasn't a secret that yellow was Fannie Lou Hamer's favorite color. And I say it's spirituals because her favorite spiritual was "This Little Light of Mine, I'm Gonna Let It Shine." And a lot of times when she did speeches, she started that speech with singing that song, or she would end with that particular song. Malcolm Little, the boy who grew up to become Malcolm X, elementary, middle here. We know Malcolm X as a human rights activist, but what do we really know about his childhood, if you think about it? What do we know about the challenges and the series of tragedies that compelled him to become the activist we know? Well, in this particular book, his childhood story is told by one of his daughters. And over the past few years, there have been quite a few books about childhood of many trailblazers, because we really realize we don't know much about a lot of the trailblazer or famous people as children. Two that come to mind is Before She Was Harriet, which is the story of Harriet Tubman when she was a child, and Preaching to the Chickens, because that's really the story, a young story about Congressman John Lewis when he was a little boy. And yes, he actually used to preach to chickens. That was his congregation. He was imitate the Southern preachers in his town with, the inflection, the rise and the fall of the voices and the call and response. But he would actually go to the chicken coop and preach to the chickens when he was a young boy. The legendary Miss Lena Horne. This one is written by Carol Boston Weatherford, and most of you might know her because Carol is, she was born in New York, but she's lived in North Carolina for many years. She's actually on the faculty in the English department at Fayetteville State University. But most people only remember Lena Horne as an actress and a singer. She's known for her grace, her style, her beauty. But many people do not know that she was also a very strong activist with the civil rights movement. And this particular book, although it talks a little bit about her life, Carol Boston actually brings in that aspect of her being an activist in the civil rights movement. And then the last little bit I'm going to do here before we go into the resources, I just throw some in this general category of understanding and celebrating differences. Like, can I touch your hair? This is poems on race, mistakes, and friendship. Charles Waters, and he's Black, and Irene Latham, who is white, they present paired poems about topics, including things like family dinners, sports, recess, and many, many more. The book explores different experiences of race in America because, like, they may have a topic that might be one that I mentioned is something about family dinners. They may have, with that, on the left side, you may see a family dinner or family discussion from a white family's point of view. And then on the opposite page, it may be something, it's at family dinner, it may be on a similar subject, but you get a chance to see how things are different as well as similar. And yes, it does contain mistakes that people should definitely avoid. And so it does give you the heads up with some of that. I was a 70s kid and I had a huge afro, if you can imagine me with that much hair, since I've been having my hair cut short for over 20 some years now. But the thing that would bother me the most when somebody would say, "Can I touch your hair?" And you know, in school, you had to say the right thing, but you can only imagine what I felt like saying. And to make it worse, those who would touch your hair without asking, because that would really get to me, because it's like, wait a minute, you know, you don't have that right. You're in my space. And besides, I had worked hard to have that perfect fro, and now you're going to touch it, and now you're going to get things off balance a little bit. So that was going to upset me anyway. The next book, Colors of the Rainbow, this actually encourages children to celebrate and appreciate both their own and other people's differences. And it shows how when people of different races and ethnic backgrounds come together, they make a pretty rainbow. Now, I admit this book is a little kumbaya-ish. It just really wants you to just hold hands and sing worldwide. But you know what? Maybe that's what children and even some of us adults actually need during some of these wearisome times. It's not a bad idea to do that every now and then. And the last book I have here is on that same note. I'm like you, you're like me. These illustrations and very simple text explores ways in which children are alike and in some ways that they are different. And I always say differences do not have to be deficits. Just because things are different doesn't mean it's wrong. It doesn't mean it's bad. One of the things I really try to work with children that I work with, my nieces and nephews, the students here at ECU and the College of Education who are going to be teachers, I try to work with them to just realize that there's nothing wrong with things being different. If someone worship, looks, loves different from you, it doesn't necessarily have to be wrong. It's just different, and that's okay. And sometimes we need to learn to be okay with that. I am going to take a sip of water here. Emily, how am I doing with time?
It is just after 5 now, so you're doing great.
All right, that's perfect. Well, that's going to help me go right into some of the selected resources. I am not going to go into all of these resources, but since you will get a copy of this, you can explore each of these. Give me a moment as I stop sharing this, and I'm going to share something else so that I can actually go in and you can see some of these things with this. So right now you do see like TRC's homepage. Okay, thank you for shaking your heads. I appreciate that. With the resources, I really like this one, Anti-Racism and Educators as Allies. I think you would find this one to be quite helpful. It talks about how you can be an ally, what is an ally. It goes through things, goes through that. But if you notice, they're going to have books for preschool to grade 2. I didn't mean to click on that, but it's okay that I did, to give you some recommendations. And they're also going to give you some things to consider. And these are kind of maybe some things that you can do as activities if you're doing discussions, but they actually pulled some books, tell you a little bit about the book and ways that you can use it. And then they also have it for grades 3 to 5. And then they have a page for educators, because they do give some books that educators may want to read to become more familiar or learn how to be anti-racist. This particular book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, this is one of the books that we here at Journal Library, we read this as a like a book club book that we read together, and we would like read the first 4 chapters, meet, discuss it. We had a great facilitator. So that is a wonderful book. And there's actually, he's done a version now for children. I haven't seen it yet. I think I have it on order, but I've not seen that yet. So I'm excited to see how he broke it down a little bit for children to understand. And then we have resources again. And some of these resources are going to be things that I'm going to talk about later, but these are all things that you can find. The Diverse Book Finder, if you have not used that before, give that a try, because it really will help you see some subject areas that you could use diverse books, and it brings out some books, because we don't need to wait until Black History Month to to have something with Black children, or wait till Native American Heritage Month, or we don't need to do that. There are things that we can incorporate diversity year round. And the Diverse Book Finder is a tool that helps do that. Let's see. Oh, I like this one. This is Community Connecting, Cultivating, and Constructing Conversations Through Literacy. This was actually, this was done as a collaboration between the Black Caucus of the American Library Association and ALS, which is the Association for Library Services to Children. And they came up with this wonderful guide here, and it's free. As you can see, the quality is extremely good. And what it does is actually talk about books for different ages that can actually help on this topic. So we've done things like pre-K to 4th grade. And I know they do middle, they do 5th through 8. And I want to think they may go up to high school. No, they go through 5th through 8, but I can fill in some of the gaps with high schools if you ever need me to. And my email address is actually going to be on the last slide I'm going to show you. But at any time that I can maybe help you with a book list, or you might have a lesson or a topic you want to teach and you can't find diverse books to integrate in that, I can help you with that. I can correlate some things to standards if you want me to do that. We're a little understaffed right now. Actually, I'm down 50% of my staff. So I might not be able to do as much as I used to do, but I am still willing to help out as much as I can. And one thing about me, if I can't do it, I'll tell you I can't do it. I was the former chair of the Coretta Scott King Book Awards Committee. So what kind of former chair would I be if I don't tell you to go to the Coretta Scott King Book Awards page? These books have been winning awards since 1970, right up through the present. And I can't wait to hear in a few weeks, might even be next week, that we are actually here the winners of the 2020 awards. Well, 2021. But with this, by them being award books, all of these books have been vetted by experts. So when you hear grade levels, you'll know that these things are appropriate for your classroom. And with this, there is a link here called Educational Resources. I'm proud to say I was on the Book Awards Committee in 2009 and 2010, and we started having our discussion guides actually in digital format and started posting them online. And as you can see that we've been doing that from 2009 up to the present. And I'm just mesmerized by these study guides because they are just beautiful. See, that's some of Kadir's work from back in the day. I just think he is just one of the most talented illustrators. But you're going to actually talk about what books were the honor and award winners with the books. And this was the first, We Are the Ship is the first book that Kadir actually wrote. And so this is the first, so he was author and illustrator of this book, and he did win author and illustrator awards for this book. But as you go through that, when you go through like We Are the Ship, it's going to tell you a little bit about the book. And I just still can't get over some of these photographs. These illustrations just really amaze me every time I look at some of this. Then they're going to give you a list of activities and discussion topics that you can do based on this book. And then we're going to have related CSK titles that if you wanted to pull various stories or topics together, you can use different ones. I always think of that as the old Reading Rainbow when LeVar Burton was to say, if you like this book, I'm sure you like these. So there's just great things that tie in with the other ones. And yeah, and that's done for every one of the winner and author books from 2009 up into the present. And once again, I just think this resource guide is just beautifully done. We've also have an illustration gallery. I will tell you that when they went to a new platform for their webpage, this got halted, and you also lost the ability. You used to could click on it and you would get a full page view of the particular illustrations, but you can't do that now. But we're working on this, and hopefully it will be back working again. And I hope they update it quite a bit because illustrations are quite limited on this particular site.
Alan, we have a question in the chat box. Someone asking if you are familiar with the book 42 is Not Just a Number by Doreen Rappaport.
You know, the title is familiar. If I've actually read it, I don't think so. This is one of the problems of doing this for over 36 years. I read some things and sometimes it sticks, and sometimes after a couple of months it goes away. I would love to hear what the person would like to say about that book because I'm interested in hearing more. Am I the only one not hearing anything?
I'm not either. Mary, are you able to unmute? Oh, she said she wants to use it with a small group, but it just became available through Scholastic.
And the name of it again is 49 is Not Just a Number?
42 is Not Just a Number. It's about Jackie Robinson.
Okay. I will have to look at that. And did you say it was Mary? But thank you so much for doing that. I always like to find things to add and read. I do know we're getting close to the end, and I do have some other things on. Okay, I've just got to talk about one. Well, no, I shouldn't talk about that because that's not going to help you too much. I need to take that off some of my list. But I am going to stop sharing my screen for a moment. Let me go back to the presentation. There's just this little place that keeps disappearing on the screen. So with that said, it's a good time to see if you have any questions for me that I can answer for you. I'll be more than happy to do so.
One question I have, and I don't know if anybody else shares this concern, but I think it's easy to talk to the kids about anti-racism and diversity and all those types of topics, but then and living in a very small rural conservative community, sometimes you get pushback from parents. And I would love to hear if you have resources or suggestions for how to address those types of concerns.
That's what I was going to bring up too.
All right, well, great. Now, some of these books will have resources that are geared specifically towards parents if they want to talk about that. But sometimes we as educators, we can only put it out there and hopefully it reaches and touches some of the kids with that. And there's so many subtle ways you can do things, because it wouldn't be saying, boys and girls, today we're going to talk about racism. It would be maybe in with another topic, and it may be one of the books that you've selected and you have conversation about that. Sometimes you are going to get flack about it. We will, but you just never know how it's going to do. But I think as educators, we have an obligation to put it out there, and because it is the right thing to do. When we're working with kids, it is the right thing to do. But there are some books. I need to
go to my administrator beforehand, like, just so you know, this is what I'm going to talk about, in case you get any phone calls, just because of kind of where we live.
Now, is this the Moore County group?
No, Carteret.
Carteret. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes you will. You will. But once again, like I say, a lot of times I do have things that you can talk to parents or things you can suggest to parents. But some of these parents, they don't want to hear it. They're not going to want to hear or read any books that you put forth with them. But that's why I do think, and I know I sound like a broken record saying it over and over again, but as educators, we're stewards of those children for a small amount of time. If nothing else, we can set a precedence for them. We can model a behavior. We can say language and do things that actually shows how we should treat each other. Even if it's not a book that you're, I hate to say cramming it down their throat, but that's the way people used to say it when I was a lot younger. Even though you're not forcing this topic on them, the least you can do is set an example as an advocate, or show your behaviors of that's how we should treat one another, and address things when things are said or done. Yeah, I feel like it's our point. If there are injustices done that we experience, we have a right to say, no, we don't say things like that here, or we don't talk to people that way. Sometimes we just have to be firm with it. And I know a lot of things, sometimes we're not personally comfortable with some things. And so sometimes it is hard even with that because I know I do another presentations, and one of my segment deals with sexual orientation. And I did just have one of the people just tell me, it's hard for me because I'm not ready there to talk about sexual orientation. So it's hard for me to do it with the kids. But I just tell people we just have to try, and we have to just keep working, and hopefully we'll get to that comfort zone. But
I have a question.
Yes.
I have a quick question. Do you, if we were, I'm a librarian at a primary school, and if I was wanting to do or put out there an opportunity to do kind of like a book study with the educators, kind of related to this and like why it's important for kids to see themselves in books, those type of things, do you have a book that you would recommend for like educators who are interested in developing that? I know.
I will have to think about a book.
Okay.
I will say that's a great question. I'll see if there is a book. I do have a presentation I actually do that I do with the Reed students here on campus that talks about the importance of children seeing, the mirrors, windows, sliding glass doors. We go through some of that, and we don't just look at race, we look at diversity in general in children's books, and we talk about why it's so important. And one of the things that the instructors do as part of that lecture, students do have to step out the box and choose books about a topic that they may not feel comfortable with or something that they wouldn't necessarily read. And they have to do an assignment with that. And it is one of those assignments that when they do that, teachers forward me emails from the students, or sometimes they even share their papers with me. It is amazing how it just opens their eyes. I mean, because one, what's the book? Oh, it deals with disabilities. But there was one person that she said she felt so uncomfortable around people with disabilities, and she knew she was going to have a problem with that with children if she didn't become more comfortable. And she read this book and she just said, it just completely opened my eyes. And I know this is something I personally am going to have to get used to and get better at. And I think that's what it's all about. That
Right.
just to let people have that, aha moment that either I get it or I don't get it, but realize I need to get it. But you can stay in touch with me about that. If you send me an email, and I will actually just, if you send an email, I will actually look at some things and see what I can find and help you as much as possible.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? I thought I was sharing screen. Oh, there it is. I do want to show you one thing that I didn't show you. It has to be here. I know it's here. Oh, wait a minute. There it is. There's actually a bibliography that we're working on here at Joyner Library. It's Race Relations, Racism, and Injustices, a selected annotated bibliography. This is where I was telling you that every book that I've talked about is going to tell you the grade levels of information about that. And it is totally evolving. So there will probably be a few months that we're going to do a major update and add some more to this. I'm one of these people, even though I read things about books sometimes, for very many books, unless I've read it myself, I don't like to put them on those lists. And we're sort of behind with when we had shut down a little bit due to COVID, processing our books. Our cataloging department is a little behind. I want to say behind. I want to make it sound like it's an inflection on them, but they couldn't carry all these books home with them, and for the longest time, books were not even being delivered. But they're really working hard to get some of these books on the shelf, and they're doing that now. So some of these books will be added to this presentation. But all in all, this is my email address. And I want you to feel free that you can email me with your questions. If it's something I can't do or something that I don't have a whole lot of knowledge about, I can connect you with people. I tell people I know people, so I can find people to do that. because Amanda, you said you're a media specialist. You know, that's what we do. We can't do everything or know everything, but we try to keep a good base of people that we can say, I can't help you with that, but if you go talk to Emily, I think she's done some research on that and she'd be glad to help you with it. But if you need anything, let me know and I will be glad to help you as much as possible. Because this is something that I think is essential. It's dear to my heart, and thank all of you for taking the time to listen to me for an hour as I share these materials and share some of my family stories and life stories with you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I love it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I really do.
You know, you're our favorite guest, and we're going to beg you to come back next year, right?
I tell you what, just keep asking me, come back. And if you have topics that you think, you know, you people may want to hear something of, because you guys are on the front line. You know what you're having trouble finding books with. You know where your questions are. I will be glad if it has anything to do with, especially collection development, injustices, diversity. I do a lot of other stuff with how to evaluate books, that kind of thing, but I am willing to talk about anything that's in my area of expertise. And once again, if it's something that I'm interested in, but I may not be the right person, I might be able to arrange a speaker for you, or it may be somebody that will do, we'll come in and do a presentation together or something. Because I do enjoy working with other people. I learn so much collaborating with other people.
Christian? Just a reminder that Alan will be speaking to Twin Rivers on January 28th.
And I appreciate who's ever put me out on the circuit, because I'm loving it. That's why I was asking for a moment, but I saw Emily. I should have known who I was speaking to. But I know the Moore County Reading Association, they have asked me to, and first time I've done anything with them. So I'm excited to do that. So yes, anytime I can work with any of them or whoever's putting me out there, thank you so much. I appreciate talking to educators. I love you guys. You're my heart. I mean, yeah. I mean, you work with books, you work with children. You have to be great people. As I tell people, you're my tribe. And it's hard to find your tribe sometimes. Anything else before we say goodbye? Well, as I said, I'm going to send a copy of this to Emily, and Emily, feel free to send this out to those who couldn't make it, or you have other people who may find it interesting. I would appreciate that. But thank you so much again.
Thank you very much.
Yes, yes. And hope to see you soon once we start having meetings and things again, conferences again.
Yeah.
I'm looking
Definitely.
forward. You know, doing things virtually is wonderful because I'm able to reach so many more people than I would be able to. I've been a guest lecturer in Canada, in China. I wouldn't have been able to do that, but I miss seeing everybody and talking with people face to face and going to dinner and having drinks, all of those good things, you know, because I tell people with conferences, most of the good stuff happens in the hallways, just talking with people over dinner and in between breaks. So I do look forward to us getting back to that. But for right now, we're doing the right thing and we know this is what we need to do. So we're doing it. We're doing it. We're good citizens. We're doing it. But thank you again so much.
Thank you.
All right. Good night, everyone.